The talk of the town with Dave, Jay, and Sam, and Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi joining us in studio this morning. You always got that cell phone handy too. I noticed that.
Just checking on my latest news here. It's,
yeah,
listening to you guys work.
He actually, he hashtagged us in a tweet. the real Twitter account.
The real Twitter account.
Do you use Twitter and Facebook as well?
Both. You have to these days. Yeah. You have to be on both. That's how most people are communicating. Actually, I saw a funny statistic this morning. The three, I think it was Jeb Bush, two of the other top, Rubio and another one, have spent like $46 million in combined TV ads or something like that in the last, Kasich. And then Donald Trump, Carson, and Cruz spent like maybe $2 million. Like Trump has only spent $200,000 in media.
Doesn't need
It's
it.
all through Twitter and Facebook, and he gets more attention that way than he does by going to doing TV commercials.
It's
amazing.
Yeah, you find it's easy to check in with your constituents that way too.
Yeah, we have constituents that will contact us a lot through Facebook, through Messenger. I'll get people who will contact us with different issues, and I can forward it off to our constituent representative, who then can work on that issue. So it's helpful. People always ask what's the preferred method of communication, and I think every elected official is different. For me, I use multiple forms, so email, whatever.
Yeah, good news about Centro there. I know that we've been talking with the representatives from Centro J recently on the show, and great news about that.
Yeah, this is big news that the money looks like it's going to get restored. And, at that point when the House of Representatives had decided to cut $12 million out of Centro, that would have led to direct service cuts here in the region. People rely on Central to get to work, to get to school, to get to doctor appointments. So any cutbacks in service routes is going to hinder people's ability to do those things. So now that the Senate and the House has come up with a deal to restore the funding, I think this is good news for our area.
Mm-hmm. Bad news for Sheldon Silver, his conviction on 7 felony charges, and the insistence by his defense that it's business as usual. It's okay, everyone does it. Didn't seem to wash very well with people.
Yeah, it's not business as usual. That's the thing that gets me, is that most of the people that are in Albany, that are in government, they're really there to do the right thing, to do good, to represent their constituents. And you have a few people who I think over the years have amassed a lot of power, like Sheldon Silver, and were able to get away with things for a long period of time, and it caught up with them. But the debate is whether we have more ethics reform or go back into session to do some changes. And we've had a lot of changes in the last couple of years, and it hasn't prevented some of this stuff from happening. So I think it really comes down to trying to get good people elected to office, keeping them in office, and trying to root out the bad actors.
The Buffalo Chronicle reporting last night that Preet Bharara also may be seeking an indictment against our governor, Cuomo, on January the 2nd.
You got to be careful with that source, though, because
yes, I was wondering about that.
From my understanding, this is the same news source that reported there's a member of the Assembly named Mickey Kearns who was he's a Democrat, but he's not in the Democratic conference, and they had reported last year, I believe, he was going to be the bipartisan choice for Speaker. So that would never have happened, and so you really got to question your source on that one. I'm not too familiar with the Buffalo Chronicle.
Yeah, I wasn't either. And Jay, I was asking you, that was the question I asked you this morning. You were saying you did feel as if it was credible?
I mentioned out for the western part of the area, outside of the Capital District, they are one of the newspapers or a media source that does some of that investigative reporting. And
I should mention, it's not the main one. It's not the Buffalo News.
It's not the Buffalo News. No. That's why I had texted a friend of mine, and I saw that article last night. I texted a colleague of mine who represents Buffalo. I said, is this a legitimate news source? And he said no. But I don't know. You never know. And
sure,
who knows what happens? Maybe they haven't covered something that the Times and some of the other bigger outlets haven't picked up on yet.
And specifically in this piece, they were quoting the fact that they had 3 credible sources coming out of the Albany area.
Right.
But I don't know about an indictment per se.
Right.
But I could see maybe looking into this further. The whole Moreland Commission idea, dismantling that.
Right.
The U.S. Attorney with some other indictments over the past few months talking about that idea, and naming some other maybe players in the Albany area that could be involved.
Yeah, so. You never know. I mean, it's always a wait and see, and hopefully the reports aren't true. It would be a shame to have another indictment like that, but if people are doing wrong, then I think the justice system has to work, and they have every right to go after these folks for doing what they're not supposed to be doing.
In the talk of the town, 100.7 FM WUTQ with Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi on the show.
And a question I always ask, we're we're the common folk here, I guess. You know, we're your constituents. You represent us. So you are in the chambers. You are in Albany. You're in the Capitol. What was the feeling then when the announcement came down about Shelley Silver being removed as the speaker? And then what do you think it's going to be like returning in a few weeks for session?
I can tell you, it was after the State of the State this past year where the announcement was first made. It came out in the middle of the night. The New York Times article reported that he was indicted and sent shockwaves, I think, throughout the Capitol. There was a group of us in the beginning who thought, are we going to continue on and let him lead the Democratic Assembly caucus, or are we going to change course? And from the first conference we had following the reports of the indictment, I could tell you I was one of 3 people to stand up in conferences to say maybe we need to change course. And it was a steady drumbeat from a lot of people who had served a long time with him to say, no, we have to circle the wagons, and this is overreaching by the prosecutor, and we certainly have to keep Shelley on as a speaker. But as time progressed, more of the newer members stood up and said, hey, enough is enough. We need to change course here. We need new leadership. Obviously he's innocent until proven guilty, but at this point, with these allegations, there's no way he could no longer serve as the Speaker of the House. So we made a move to remove him, and eventually he did step down, which is good. But initially, I think the reaction within the Democratic conference was, let's circle the wagons here and keep Shelley on as a Speaker. But what I think they miscalculated a little bit, because half the conference is newer members elected since 2010, and not all of us had the same loyalties towards Sheldon Silver as some of the members who had served with him for 20, 30, 40 years. Sure,
and I remember when the story came out, and it was a day or two after that you said, okay, it's enough is enough, and you mentioned a few other members, but he still had quite a bit of power as far as voting power and veto power, for folks to go along with him in a lot of those steps. Did you and maybe the other 2 or 3 or whatever other individuals feel some of that heat from the other folks?
We certainly felt heat from some of the more senior members in the conference who had served longer with him, who had said, look, we're going to stick with Shelley. And a lot of us just said, how can we do that? I mean, these are very serious allegations involving the public's trust, and we're going to ask him to go in and negotiate a budget for us. How can we say that we have a good deal here? How do we know it's not something else? So I think, it was a little nerve-wracking, because you've heard stories about his power and retaliation and what happened to members who had stood up against him in the past, and how they were no longer members anymore. And, the ultimate thing for me is I want to, you can do what you want to me. I'll go back and live with my family and work as a lawyer, but I don't want to hurt the constituents that I represent, and I don't want things to be held against my district because I took a stand against him. So when I felt the time was right, I stood up and said, look, we have to get rid of him. It's time to move in a new direction. And luckily enough, there was enough newer members who were able to back us up on that and move into a new realm.
And hopefully we can turn the tide against the public sentiment that New York State is a corrupt place for politicians. I know that we talked to a guy who's starting a political corruption museum in Albany, of all things, in 2019. With all these cases going on, hopefully we turn it back in the other direction.
Yeah, you've had 30 of these cases over the last few years. It's sad. It really is. And this is what really rocks people's faith in government. I think public service is one of the most noble professions that there is, and unfortunately, when you have things like this that happen, people just lose faith, and it also forces other people who may think about running for office to give it a second thought. So to try and find good candidates to run for these jobs these days is very difficult, because there's such a negative connotation attached to a public official, and you just have to continue to do your business, and like I do, I go out, I meet with constituents, I try to do the best job I can representing the district. I think we've had a lot of good things happen over the last few years, and hopefully more to come. So, I think as long as you're true to the people that you represent, and you're out there and you're meeting with people and you're open and transparent, people will send you back to office.
Does the governor call for a special election to fill this seat? And if so, how early on do you think this will happen?
I think from what I saw yesterday, he's going to call for a special election sometime in April to coincide with the federal primary. There's actually 3 vacancies in the Assembly. There's one on Staten Island. There's one now, the Shelley Silver seat. And there's another one which I'm forgetting. But there will be a special election, from what I'm reading over the last couple of days, probably to coincide with the federal primary.
Talking to Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi on the Talk of the Town. Yesterday, Assemblywoman Claudia Tenney joined us, and we had an interesting clip here, Jay, that we wanted to play for the Assemblyman of Claudia Tenney's appearance on the show from yesterday, where you were welcoming another guest to the show, Jay, when he joined Assemblyman Claudia Tenney, and the two of them spoke together. Here was Jay's intro of that segment.
We need new leadership.
No, that's not the one, I don't think.
Utica School Board President Chris Salatino is in, and actually he's here. He's going to announce he's running for your assembly seat, Claudia.
Is he? He doesn't live in my district. I wish he would, though.
Chris,
I think you'd be great in the assembly, especially now. Yeah. Now that we're cleared the way with Sheldon Silver, we need new leadership.
Right. So, we're going to be talking about...
I'm pitching him. Run for assembly.
So, I don't know if it was a joke or not, or whether there was some intent there, but the Assemblywoman pitching Chris Salatino, who seemed a little uncomfortable during this segment, the Utica City School President there. So, I don't know if you had any reaction to that.
Well, Chris and I are good friends, actually. I mean, we served on the Utica School Board together. He's a personal friend of mine, so I would highly doubt that he would consider running because we work so well together. My advocacy for the school district, I've talked to him on a regular basis, so I don't think he would do that, but you never know what happens. And Assemblywoman Tenney is going to do what she's going to do and stir the pot as usual, and that's unfortunate. But what are you going to do?
I may have started.
Appropriate of her to have made that suggestion, or
well, look, the way I operate is I try to work with everybody, anyone that represents the county, that represents the area, regardless if you're a Democrat or Republican. And there's other officials that choose a different path, that choose not to work with others, that choose to really just focus on their own particular desires and wants, and really ultimately the constituents are the ones that lose out. So if you look at Washington nowadays and you have Democrats and Republicans that don't even talk to each other, you have a fractured Republican Party with the Tea Party on one side and the more mainstream Republicans on the other, and nothing's getting done. We're another 8 days away from a government shutdown, and it's terrible, the culture that is allowed to persist in Washington over the last couple decades. It's really gotten to a fever pitch now, and really what we need now is people who can go to Washington, who can work together, who want to get things done, just like Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill did back in the 80s when they saved Social Security. Democrats and Republicans coming together, putting aside their personal differences to get things done. That's what the country wants, and that's why I work so well with Senator Griffo, and I get more compliments from people, and he does as well. It's just saying it's nice to see the two of you working together. It's just refreshing to see that. And whether he gets credit or I get credit doesn't really matter because rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah, it's interesting with the presidential election going on. Somebody characterized the Democratic Party as being similar to the way the Republican Party used to be, in that there doesn't seem to be any younger leadership. Now, you're an anomaly to that, of course, on your end, but it is interesting where the main Democratic candidates seem older and some of the Republican candidates seem younger. Do you think there's a reason for that, or is it just the sign of...
I think that's the case locally as well.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. I think what I can tell you is that it's really hard to find people to run for office these days. Whether it's on the city level, the county level, the state level, or the national level, it's very difficult to recruit people to run for office. People are working. They're happy in their careers. They don't want to undergo the scrutiny that you have to go through sometimes. Being a public official, your life is completely public, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I just in the last week or two, since I said I was even considering.
Okay, you're going down that road.
Considering running for Congress, right. I've had 3 new Twitter accounts attacking me and my record, which is people who don't nameless people, faceless people that just go and start a Twitter account. They want to start attacking you, and I haven't even said whether or not I'm considering running for Congress. But certainly, someone out there is very concerned about the potential of me jumping in this race, and I could see it on Twitter on a daily basis.
Well, I was the culprit yesterday, stirring up.
Were you one of them?
No, maybe they're stirring up the trouble with the question here with Claudia and Chris Salatino. So Might as well do it again today, Anthony.
When would you make a decision on that?
You know, it's hard to say. I mean, it really comes down to two things for me. First and foremost, it comes down to my family. I have two young children, an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, who I love dearly, my wife, and it's a very personal decision. Being in Washington 4 days a week, being back in the district, which is not just Utica and Rome, it's Utica, Binghamton, and a large area of upstate New York. So you're traveling around a lot. And being involved in my children's lives is very important to me. But ultimately, we got to do what's in the best interest of my family, for me. But also, I want to do what I think is in the best interest of the constituents that I represent. If I think I could be more effective on the state level, I'll stay in the Assembly. If I think I could do a better job in Congress, then I would consider it. But at this point, I have no plans of running, and we'll wait and see what happens. But it's a very intense personal decision, and ultimately, it comes down to family.
When did you first become? When did you first become involved in politics as an interested youngster? Like, what age were you that you remember? I really would like to do this for a living.
I can remember it was my senior year in college that I first started to get interested in politics, and all through high school, grammar school, middle school, I never had an interest. I never took positions on issues one way or the other. I kind of just went with the flow. But I started to get more active in college, and that's
Albany
really
Law.
Well, I was a senior at Siena at the time, and then Albany Law after that. So that's really when I first started to get interested in politics, and I think it really goes back to my mother, who was she passed away, but when she was alive, she was very interested in politics and democratic politics, and she served in the Women's Democratic Club, and I think she had that bug, and whatever gene was in her transferred down to me, and it kind of gave me the bug as well. But I love the job because it's always a new challenge. It's always something different, and ultimately you get to help people. That's what I want to do. I want to try and make this area a better place to live in. That's why I ran in the first place, because I want to see young people, my children, other people's children, and folks my age and in their 20s who will stay in this area and make something of it. I have tremendous memories growing up here, and I want to see young people have those same memories, because I think ultimately this is a great place to live and to grow up and to work. But we've had some hard times over the last couple decades, but I think things are turning around.
And if you do decide to make a run at Congress, you're going to announce on a radio program right here.
Talk of the town.
Okay,
right?
all right, very good. And Senate Majority Leader John Flanagan in town yesterday, and he was critical, made some statements about the AG's lawsuit against the Utica School District. You and I, we spoke a little bit a few weeks ago on Rick Timms off the air. You and I, and we had Rick in to talk about, and from the New York School Finance Consortium, about the position that Utica is in. Your take on this?
I was very delighted to see John Flanagan criticize the Attorney General for the actions against the Utica School District. He made some comments in the editorial article today, which said that if they had the money, they wouldn't be in this situation. And I plan to hold him to his words when we get back into session, because I would love to see a change to the formula that would help smaller city school districts like Utica and Rome, especially Utica, that has a growing refugee population. And I think one of the roadblocks has been some pushback in the Senate on Long Island. So I think hopefully, if he's true and he really means that if they had more money they could provide these programs, well, he's in a very powerful position now to make that happen. So I hope he sticks to that when we go into the budget next year.
And quickly on the Senate side, tomorrow we have Senator Jeff Klein on from forming the IDC, the Independent.
And you guys are getting all the big names.
And we have Congressman Hanna on tomorrow.
Yeah, we have the Congressman on as well tomorrow. So any thoughts going forward, looking at the Senate side of things with Jeff Klein and the Independent Democratic Caucus forming that coalition, I guess, if you will? Do you see them holding ground, maybe having some power?
I think they hold ground this year. The big question mark is what's going to happen in next year's election. Will the Senate Democrats retake the Senate? Will they need help of the IDC to help get that majority? Will the IDC stick with the Republicans? I think the day after the election is going to be very interesting if it's close, like it was a few years ago, forming these coalitions. But I think at least for the short term into this session, you'll see that continued, well, it's not really a power-sharing agreement anymore because the Republicans have outright majority, but you'll continue to see cooperation, I think, between the IDC and the mainline Republicans in the Senate, and who knows what happens after the election next year.
So we may get some stuff done.
Hopefully. I mean, we got to get things done.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing, is getting stuff done for the people.
All right, we're trying to stuff the bus, too, and Jay and I will be starting our camp out on Monday at the New Hartford Shopping Center. Hope you'll stop by.
I would love to stop by. You're going to be broadcasting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. You always bring a donation.
We'll bring some toys for the kids.
And you support many different local organizations here, so I'm sure you're in line with what we do.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Assemblyman. Appreciate
the time.
Thank you.